Okay, folks, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us today for our weekly seminar for the Center for Tropical Environmental and Sustainability Science at JCU. We call ourselves TESS, is our nickname, and we're Tessians, and we do TESS-like stuff because we care about the environment, we care about ecology, we care about evolution, we care about the world and nature, and we care about what's happening. And the whole era around energy and renewable energy is obviously in an incredible state of flux right now, a planet with more than 8 billion people and a world that just wants more a lot of the time. Do we go down the path towards nuclear energy? Do we go down the path towards sustainable, so-called sustainable energy such as hydro? Or do we go down other kinds of paths such as coal or also renewables such as wind and solar, which are obviously becoming increasingly important to us because we're starting to see the real footprint of what these kinds of projects are going to mean for the natural world. Yet, on the other hand, of course, we need more energy, so we have to grapple with these kinds of issues. I first met Carolyn Emms a little while ago, a couple months ago, and one of the first things I was struck by was, wow, this lady is a force of nature. And I really want her on my side if there's any scientific debate evolving out of this. So without further ado, we're going to introduce Carolyn. She has put together a giant program with more technology. I thought this was going to be a rock concert for a minute, but more technology than we've ever had. And without further ado, we'll welcome Carolyn Emms. Thank you.
I'd like to thank distinguished Professor Bill Lawrence for inviting Rainforest Reserves to present this at this university. Thank you very much, Bill and Annabelle, for all your assistance. First of all, I'd like to just say an acknowledgement. At James Cook University, we acknowledge the Australian, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Jabakai, Yurungandi and Girramai Yidinji, on which our campuses and study centres are located and where we conduct our business. We pay our respects to ancestors and elders, past, present and future. JCU is committed to honouring Australian, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples' unique cultural and spiritual relationships to the land, waters and seas, and their rich contribution to the JCU society. Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming today. This is just a fantastic turn up. Thank you, friends of nature. Look, we have a distinguished group of speakers, including Indigenous elders, scientists, nature photographers, lawyers and energy experts. So we're going to present a constellation of views on environmental and societal costs of wind and solar developments. Eastern Australia and the Great Dividing Range are hotspots for future wind developments with the potential for disruption of some of the continent's most biological important ecosystems. Individual abstracts and biographies for the speakers. I'm just going to introduce the speakers as they come. First of all, I'd like you to introduce our special Jirrbal Aboriginal custodians and elder. Would you like to come forward, Georgina, and maybe come together? So we have two speakers here, Georgina Stacpoole, who is a custodian of Chulumban and has been advocating to protect Aboriginal culture and heritage for future generations. Also, Uncle David Carney, traditional owner and elder of Chulumban. And feel free to come and stand together if you want to. Other Indigenous custodians of Chulumban, if you would like to. Georgina.
Hey guys, I'm Georgina, my cousin David, another cousin Trish, and our niece Melita. We've been on a long journey with this, and we come from a cultural point of view, and we feel that no one understands environment and what it means to protect it more than us, because it is our lifestyle, it is our identity, and it's how we've come thousands of years to be here where we are today. I understand, yes, we need better ways of finding energy, but we don't believe it's at the cost of our culture. We don't believe that's any benefit to us. It's hard for us because we feel it in our spirit. We are connected to that country. And when you start playing with the country, it's a playing with our spirit. It affects our spirit and how we function as Indigenous people coming from that land. And I had a discussion last night where it was talking about healing country. Country will heal itself. You can't walk in and heal country. It knows what needs to be done and it will do it in its own time. So you can put up windmills or solar farms and then come back 20 years later and say that you're going to plant trees. That's not going to be the same as it was. You're not healing, you're putting a Band-Aid on it. You're putting a quick fix there. And for us, we want to hold on to that because us in particular, we are fighting to pass our culture down to the next generation. And it's not only up home where we come from, but I've seen it down on the coast. I was driving around with my brother and I said, hey, can we go to that fishing spot? No, you can't go there, they put a fence there. Same thing, farming, industrialisation, you know. So the more this comes, the more we lose. And we need that country to teach our children and keep culture going. Without that, we have nothing. Our future is pretty bleak. And it's, you know, that's where language comes from. Language comes from country. It's okay to read about our language in the book, but to truly understand language, you need to be on country and feel it and experience it. And that's how we've been taught for centuries, because we remember those particular things that that language relates to. So that's why it's very important for us. And another reason is our elders, when they're sick, they want to go home. They don't mean to a dwelling, they mean out on country. They want to heal their spirit. In healing their spirit, they're healing their whole being. So that's why country is important to us and why we understand that we need more energy, but not at the cost of our culture. We don't believe that it's worth it. That's why we stand here today, because of who we are, not what we need or what we want, but because of who we are inside.
Hi, how are you going, folks? Well, what Georgina said was the basics of it all. That, you know, whatever energy is going to be made out of, like she said, it's going to destroy us. Because, like, it's the land. We don't own the land owns us. We just got to look after it. And that's the only thing that I've got to say anyway, because I see in a different perspective from a lot of different other tribes that most of them live on country. Some of them, me and my family, we moved back onto country the last couple of days. And now we are waiting to be evicted from our settlement where we all grew up when we were children. We are just waiting for a government to come and kick us off there. But they can't, because it's tribal land. But don't matter if it's tribal land, they still can come and take it. And that sort of upsets us all. And all the young fellas home in Raven say, all they want to do is fight about it. Fighting is not going to solve it. Talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your voice. We didn't make it to Canberra, but in a way some things are meant to be. Not too far to go, coming here, staying in this lovely place. Thank you for that. Thank you. Look, I'd like to, everybody, I think, hands up, who knows Stephen Nowakowski? Yeah, just about everybody in this room. Stephen, would you like to step up? And Stephen Nowakowski is a widely published nature photographer who specialises in natural history and publications. His self-publishing business now distributes widely and fulfils Stephen's desire to convey his love of nature and wild places. Okay.
Yes, thank you everyone. Yeah, it's a great turnout, so thank you for everyone coming, and thank you to our Jirrbal friends. Thank you to Bill Lawrence. I normally do a 1 hour presentation. I'm going to condense it down to 20 minutes, and a lot of people have seen this presentation already, but I'll skim through it really quickly. There's a bit of new information here. So my introduction to renewable energy happened in 2017 when the Mount Emerald wind farm was proposed, and then I was engaged to photograph the construction of that wind farm. And back in the day, I was a really big supporter of renewables, and the proponents were saying that this particular development would provide power to around 70,000 homes. And I thought, well, then we're done and dusted here in Cairns. We've got renewable energy, so I was very supportive of it. Just going back to that blade, that's 57 metres long. The new generation, which I'll be talking about now, are basically twice this length. They're 89 metres. The Upper Burdekin wind farm, which is about to be announced any day now, those blades will be 99 metres. So they'll be twice as long as these. That's a 12-tonne blade. The new generation of blades are around 20 tonne. The nacelles, the centre gearboxes, are up to 400 tonne. So the reason why I'm showing these images is to show you the size of the componentry that needs to go into these really high remnant, remote, wild places. And I know Mount Emerald because I walked all over it, and it was a hot spot for biodiversity. 5 endangered plant species, really good population of northern quolls. And today it's an industrial estate, an industrial park full of substations, high voltage transmission lines, a road network. So it's really the industrialisation of that landscape. But back in the day, I thought, well, this is the price we need to pay for renewable energy. And that was a sacrifice that many of us in North Queensland were happy to have, was this sacrifice for renewable energy. There's no audio. Yeah, so there's a lot of earthworks. The civil earthworks, the civil earth moving is very considerable. It involves heavy civil machinery, blasting out ridge lines, rock breaking machinery to get those big components into these really remote areas. And then I thought, well, we're good here. We've got the Mount Emerald wind farm. We've got power for 70,000 homes. We're carbon neutral now. And then a few years later, I discovered there was a new big wind farm just to the south of Mount Emerald called the Cairns wind farm. And so I had a tip off that the bulldozers were there. I went there and photographed and documented the land clearing for the Cairns wind farm. And this is beautiful forest, beautiful high elevation forest just to the north of Ravenshoe. And documented the bulldozers, you know, flattening beautiful forests, basically untouched, and clearing areas for the turbine pads, and then the big roads that are needed to get these big components into the site. And then the clearing of all the ridge lines and the blasting out of the ridge lines for the turbines. Yeah, so yeah, vast amounts of earth moving, and you'll notice there that there's no sediment control, no erosion control. It's remnant vegetation, so it should have been controlled by the Vegetation Management Act, the Nature Conservation Act, but none of those pieces of legislation can be enacted with a wind farm. So basically, that legislation is exempt from wind farms at state level. So primary producers, for example, if they need to build a dam or clear a fence line, they need to abide by the Vegetation Management Act and the reef regulations, but multinational companies can come in and blast out ridge lines, and they're exempt from all of that. Yeah. Now, it's not necessarily the bulldozing of the roads per se that are an issue. They're a big issue. They form a barrier for our mammals and wildlife. But it's pushing these roads into remote areas that there's been no incursions into these areas before. So what happens, these are now areas where there's weed incursions, altered fire regimes, and things like edge effects occur. So when you push a road through a forest, you get edge effects. So you get weeds growing on the edges, and there's changes in light, and therefore a change in forest diversity, and that penetrates up to 200 metres into the forest either side. So as you can see, this is why the roads need to be so wide. Those blades there are 89 metres long to give you a sense of scale. Yeah, so you can see the amount of earth moving. So this is Cairns, and then you have, and then I thought, well, this is Cairns. This is going to provide more renewable electricity. What else is in the pipeline? You know, because no one really knew about Cairns. This just sort of came right straight under the radar. No one knew about it. The local residents didn't really know, just the immediate neighbours, but they were really silenced with confidentiality agreements. One thing that the residents weren't aware of is the fact that these turbines are illuminated at night because of aviation issues. These towers are around 275 metres high. So we don't know what the impact are on bats, for example, that are being attracted now to the lights, and also the impact on birds and raptors and so forth. So it made me think, well, what's next? And it took quite a while within rainforest reserves and our volunteers to try to track down what is happening in North Queensland. And these are the projects that are in the pipeline for North Queensland. So we've got about 14,100 hectares of classified remnant forests between Ingham and Cooktown earmarked to be cleared for more of these projects. And really no one knows about these. These have all slipped in under the radar. So they go through council as code accessible. They go through state government under State Code 23, which is really just a free kick. No project has been knocked back at state level. And then they go straight through to the federal department, EPBC Act. And the EPBC Act is only triggered if there's a threatened, vulnerable or endangered species. Otherwise it gets completely approved with no capacity for anyone to have any say at all. So I started looking at some of these projects, and people say that, well, the Kidston Pumped Hydro is a really good project. And a lot of the green groups say, well, this is what we need to be doing. And the Kidston Pumped Hydro is a good project with regards to where the solar panels are going and the dam. So the dams are going into two retired coal mining pits, and the solar has gone out onto a tailings dam. So there's no impact on biodiversity. But no one talks about stage 2, which is 1,900 hectares of Thermida forest to be cleared to make the whole project viable. You know, and this is just one of many. So that's the forest there to be cleared, 1,900 hectares. And then when we dug down even deeper, there's a project called the Upper Burdekin Wind Farm, just west of Ingham on the Seaview Range. So basically all that country in the distance, that's the Karma Wind Farm, which is a new wind farm we just found a few weeks ago by scouring the EPBC web portal. All the country there in the distance is all going to be turbines. That's a Twiggy Forest Squadron Energy project. That's Mount Fox Crater in the foreground. That's a naturally cleared crater. And the site is just amazing. It's full of Shaman rock wallabies, one of the best population of the northern extent of koalas. There were red goshawks found on the site, which is the holy grail of raptors in Australia. And Plebiscite is due to make the announcement or the approval decision any day now. And I know she'll approve it most likely, and she'll just offset it all. You know, this is what it, you know, so just basically offset it. I'll talk more about offsets later. We believe there's more rock art on the site. We really don't know because the Gugu Badan people signed the Indigenous Land Use Agreement before a cultural survey was done. So we don't even know what they've signed away. I believe, and Tom Gertz, who I've been to this site with, we believe there is more rock art there. And that's the footprint, so it's quite a huge footprint. When we overlay this wind farm footprint, the haulage roads over the city of Cairns, that's what it looks like. It would extend from Palm Cove right down to Jirrbal. That's the scale. These boulder fields where the Sharman's rock wallabies hang out, they'll be blasted out for the haulage roads. This site, which is now Squadron Energy, they've got they're building the Upper Burdekin wind farm. They've got the rights to build there. They've signed an agreement with the host. That was earmarked to be the next national park acquisition for Queensland because of its high biodiversity. It's now going to be an industrial wind farm. So just quickly, why is it here? Well, it's all about the transmission lines. And it's those red lines on the map are the transmission lines, the high voltage lines here in North Queensland. And as you can see, there's the Mount Emerald, Caban, there's a big solar farm, Desailly up north. That's huge. That's around 2,500 hectares of savanna woodlands to be cleared for solar. And then the Shulumban wind farm, the Upper Burdekin, and then just south of there, I haven't mapped that yet on this map, is the Karma wind farm, and then the Hidden Valley wind farm, and the Zigzag wind farm, which is just south of this map, which we just found out about just in the last few weeks. And that's just north of Paluma. So all the country between Paluma, all that wet sclerophyll forest between Paluma and Mount Fox will be hundreds and hundreds of turbines with potentially 5 wind farms, including the Mount Fox Energy Park. Now, what the conservation sector is saying, and they want to congregate all the renewables into areas of low biodiversity. And this comes out of the Net Zero report that was published late last year. It's a great report. It was endorsed by the Climate Council, the Australian Conservation Foundation, and even the Minderoo Foundation, which is Twiggy Forest's foundation. So this is what the conservation groups are pushing for, is for all the renewables to be congregated in low biodiverse areas. I know that this is an absolute delusion because transmission loss alone destroys this idea. But you've got these green groups holding on to this idea that this may happen, and it's complete rubbish. And this is what is actually happening in Queensland right now, while everyone is sleepwalking. There's actually 109 projects. There's actually 111 if we include the Zigzag and Hidden Valley wind farms that we just found out about last week. And if we look at the spatial footprint of Queensland, all these wind farms are going right down the Great Dividing Range of Queensland where there's a bit of wind. So they're trying to get the wind that happens to be next to or adjacent to existing transmission infrastructure because it's cheaper. If there's a wind resource there, I don't know. I know, for example, I know for a fact the wind resource west of Rockhampton is not a good wind resource area. But if we zoom in just into this area between Rockhampton and Gladstone, we can see where the transmission infrastructure is. All those black lines are the high voltage lines. Clark Creek was approved under the previous federal government, so Susan Ley approved that. The bulldozers are in there right now at Clark Creek. They're clearing around 1,000 hectares of koala habitat right now. That's a Squadron Energy Twiggy Forest project. With the election of the federal Labor government, it just went nuts. So in the last 12 months, we saw Lotus Creek, and this is a progression of what's happened just in the last 12 months. That's where it's at. I showed this map to Colin Boyce, who's the federal member for this area, and he knows of about another 50 projects that aren't on my map. Because we don't know about these projects, they go straight through to Keeper. Now, yeah, so this is what's happening along all our Great Dividing Range of Queensland, from Cairns to the New South Wales border. If we zoom down into the Clark Creek wind farm, which is being bulldozed right now, and we do a regional ecosystems overlay, we can see the red haulage roads, the lines, and those roads are going straight into of concern vegetation, which is the yellow. The green is classified remnant, and the white is cleared land. Not one conservation group put in not one green group put in opposition to these haulage roads going into of concern vegetation. These are photos of it just a few months ago. No sediment control, no erosion control, just bulldozing the tops of ridges and pushing the material over the edge. If we look at Lotus Creek, this is an amazing place. It should be the Great Koala National Park of Queensland. Bulldozers are moving in there any day right now. I've got neighbours down there who are on standby to call us, and we're going to go down and blockade this site. This is just criminal. And they found 101 koalas. The ecologists found 101 koalas, many with cubs on their back, 138 greater gliders in this project footprint. One of the highest density of koalas and greater gliders that have ever been found. The photograph in the bottom right, every ridgeline there you see will be blasted out. There's going to be a road going down that bottom ridge with some sort of bridge system going over that river and then punched up the other ridgeline. I did an overlay, so on the picture on the left is a Google overlay of the haulage roads and then a drone photo I've taken on the right. And basically every ridgeline you see there will be blasted out with turbines. We look at that's the Boomer Range. Again, we've got haulage roads going in right through of concern vegetation. If this was a primary producer or a coal mine or any other mine, it would get knocked back. Moa Creek, this is just west of Rockhampton. This was just declared a controlled action under the EPBC Act the other day. I was fortunate to go up in a helicopter over this site, and every ridge you see here will be blasted out. See this knoll here? There's a turbine going on top of that. There's 3 turbines going along that cliff line. They'll blast it out. Now, this proponent, they actually bought a larger, so they got the rights to a larger area, which also included the Moonlight Range. The Moonlight Range is actually, it's like this. It's just undulating, mountainous cliff lines. This proponent walked away from that Moonlight Range site because it was just going to be too hard. Another wind farm proponent has taken it on, and they're just going to use more dynamite. So going back to the 109 projects, 111 projects, the total renewable nameplate capacity for all those projects is 22 gigawatt. Queensland uses about 13. Now you have to remember 15 to 35% capacity factors for renewable projects. They don't operate all the time. They're intermittent, so they only run at 15 to 35%. So we really need to at least double that 110 projects to 220 projects to try to get meaningful electricity it could be, yeah, so. And that also includes all the critical mineral mining, rare earth mining, and all the transmission infrastructure. Just this morning, I did a latest count of all the turbines that are proposed, the number of turbines. There's 3,224 turbines in the pipeline for the Great Dividing Range of Queensland. But that excludes the Proserpine Wind Farm, Youngalla Wind Farm, Zigzag, and quite a few others that we don't exactly know those footprints for. So you can very safely say well over 4,000 turbines are in the pipeline for the Great Dividing Range of Queensland. The Proserpine wind farm and the Gulngay wind farms, they're ticking time bombs. Both of those are about 150 turbines each. And that's in really beautiful wet sclerophyll forests just north of Gulngay National Park. Pumped hydro, I won't talk about that. If we do the mapping of the actual endangered ecosystems to be cleared for all these projects, we're looking at 37 hectares endangered dominant, 26,000 hectares of remnant. Now, when we include those edge effect areas, because we're going to, once you push roads through, there's those 200 metres either side of edge effects. We're looking at around 200,000 hectares of forests to be impacted upon. With all those 110, 111 projects, there's 4,600 kilometres of brand new haulage roads to be punched through what is left of our remnant wild places of Queensland. So 4,600 kilometres of new roads. Yeah, so now the State Energy and Jobs Plan, which was released last year, says that we need around 600,000 hectares of land to get to 10 gigawatt, but then you need to basically, well, times that by 2 or 3 really. You really need about 1.8 million hectares of land in Queensland to try to get to a figure of electricity generation that's meaningful. Steve will talk more about this later. The Net Zero report also says that it's going to cost $7 to $9 trillion by 2060 to achieve that, and that will also mean and include gas peaking plants and also carbon sequestration. Why do we need so much renewables? Why do we need 200 or potentially 200 wind farms and solar farms in Queensland? It's because renewables are intermittent, unreliable, and this graph here tells the story. So those few photos you saw at the start of Mount Emerald, this is the data that's come out of the Mount Emerald wind farm for 2022. As you can see, it's very inefficient. For 182 days for the year 2022, it only generated less than 18% capacity factor. For 63 days, it generated 0 electricity cumulatively. And 107 days, it generated less than 10 megawatt of electricity. So it's not a meaningful generation of electricity. That's why we need so much of it. That's why we need 4,000 turbines to try to get this capacity factor up. Now, when you look at RATCH, who are the owners of the Mount Emerald wind farm, if you look at the owners of Mount Emerald, RATCH last year, they made $161 million, 0 tax. They're now listed as one of the top 100 companies in Australia that pay no tax. And it's all about the offsets and the certificates. I'd love to talk more about that as well, but we're not going to have time. My thoughts are, should we be clearing and fragmenting forests for renewables? Are we going down the wrong path? Where is our model for 100% renewables? And what other countries are carbon free? It is a climate emergency and all options need to be on the table. And 75% of coal and gas needs to be replaced with some sort of clean energy. And I'm not an energy expert. It's just in the last 4 or 5 years I've taken an interest in this. And these are my ideas. And I expect everyone to have different ideas, but my idea is that we need good renewables, which are rooftop solar, small community grids, locally owned wind farms, some industrial size that have community consent, that aren't in places of significant cultural areas and high biodiverse areas. And the no-brainer for me is nuclear. And I was very against nuclear. I had to put my ideology aside, look at it again with fresh eyes and through with fresh optics, and I've realised that nuclear is going to have to be a part of our solution. I won't go through that. And when you start digging down into nuclear, you quickly learn that some of the most brightest minds on Earth are advocating for nuclear. James Hansen, who first raised the issue of global warming to the US Senate back in the 1980s. He's a big proponent or big supporter of nuclear. The Dalai Lama knows that the spatial footprint for renewables is just ridiculous. James Lovelock, the author of Gaia Hypothesis, he's been writing books about nuclear. Dick Smith, he was one of the only people back in the day campaigning against the Mount Emerald wind farm. He knew that it was completely inefficient and it would fragment that really special area with high biodiversity. And I think nuclear must be a part of the solution. Nuclear eliminates the need for new transmission lines and provides enormous power generation in a tiny footprint. So other countries that are going to going to nuclear, Ontario, Canada, Rolls-Royce are going to start rolling out their SMRs in England, hopefully in around 2030. Poland is going nuclear. The United Arab Emirates have been very successful in building out 3 1-gigawatt reactors very quickly within 10 years. South Africa have signed contracts, they're going ahead. Japan are doubling down on nuclear. India are ramping up nuclear. China are building 12, they're starting construction on 12 a year using their own proprietary technology. And there's about another 50 countries that are looking at nuclear. And I think over time, more people like myself will realise that nuclear is going to have to be a part of the solution. Otherwise, we're going to smash whatever is left of biodiversity in this great state of Queensland. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for that extremely sobering and compelling presentation. Big applause for Stephen. Thank you. I'd like to introduce you to Roger Martin. Roger Martin is a wildlife biologist who lives on the Atherton Tablelands in far north Queensland. In 1983, he was awarded the degree of Master of Science by Monash University for his pioneering research on the ecology of koalas in Victoria. He continued his work on koalas in the late 1990s and published numerous scientific papers on their biology over that time. In 1989, he was commissioned by the Victorian Department of Conservation to write the first management plan for the koala in that state. There's a huge amount of credentials that we can be proud of having Roger live in the Atherton Tablelands, and we're very lucky and privileged to have him. Roger.
My co-author, Richard, sends his apologies. He has elderly parents and he had to deal with the situation. I was going to have some opening remarks about the extent of wind farms, but I don't think I need to do that. I think you're probably all sufficiently depressed without me labouring that point. A lot of these wind farms are in climate refugia. There's been a lot of modelling, climate modelling done, and a lot of what it really boils down to, and I suppose it's self-evident, is that a lot of these higher altitude, wet sclerophyll, upland woodlands are prime koala habitat, but the modelling suggests that in the hotter future that we all face, the lowland populations of koalas won't survive. They won't survive a 2.5 degree climate increase, but they will have a much better chance in the cooler upland forests. So most of these forests are climate change refugia for koalas and for many other of the mammals up there. So this really, yes. So we're talking about the full extent of forest going all the way down the coast to the New South Wales border. But the increasing length, frequency and intensity of wildfires in the south will no doubt impact koala populations in the upland forests down there. So in comparison, the fire season in these upland forests in the far north, and I mean most of my work up here has been on the tablelands and a little bit out west, out to the Gilbert. But the longer, if anything is going to happen, it's probably the wet seasons are going to get a bit longer. So it's already a short fire season in the north compared with what's happening down south. So a lot of these more southerly places, which are the modelling, which is mainly based on physiological constraints like water availability and temperature tolerance, a lot of those are going to be in a great deal of trouble too. So it leaves these northern forests as being very, very important. The northern upland forests may be crucially important to the long-term conservation of wild koala populations. No, that's not the one I wanted. There we go. Northern koalas have a suite of characters which make them very difficult to find, and many of the wildlife surveys done by the various consultants that worked for the wind farm companies did not use appropriate techniques and did not record the presence of koalas at the sites. But koalas are widespread through these forests, but they appear to be a little bit ecologically different to the southern populations. I mean, both southern and northern koalas are solitary, but these northern animals, or at least the ones that we've been working on, there seems to be there's certainly abundant populations at Upper Burdekin and Lotus Creek, I think was the place. And I haven't been to those places. I'd love to get to them, but the people who own those places are not too keen for koala biologists to enter the scene. So these northern populations, particularly on the tablelands, they occupy huge home ranges. They're in low abundance, so they're probably less than one animal to the square kilometre. They're strictly nocturnally active, and they're highly mobile. In the breeding season, our males move 1.5 kilometres a night. So the result of this is they're seldom seen. I mean, I've met farmers up on the tablelands who've lived there for 60 years and never seen a koala, but our koalas with satellite tags on move through their property. So they're very, very hard to see. And that's the reason I think the reason they haven't been detected in most of these environmental impact studies done by the wind farm proprietors. But the key to low abundance is really the auditory connection between the population. Male koalas rely on low-frequency bellows to maintain contact with their conspecifics, and the mating success probably depends on that. So they rely on these low-frequency calls to maintain contact with other animals. They're virtually invisible to us, but they've got a pretty good idea of who's around. The thing about low-frequency sound is that it's not attenuated by forest cover. It travels a really long distance, and so koalas know about the presence of other animals from some distance away, hundreds of metres. So not surprisingly, koalas show they're supremely well adapted for both making and hearing low-frequency sound. There are what they call velar vocal folds, just loose tissue around the larynx where it vibrates at very low frequencies. So they're able to produce 11 hertz. They're able to produce calls which go down to 11 hertz. You're probably not aware, 11 hertz probably doesn't mean much to you. Our hearing range is from about 20 hertz up to about 20,000 hertz. The story of the African elephant will probably illustrate how significant this is. Elephants and their use of low-frequency sound has been studied now for 20 or 30 years, and they communicate by very low-frequency rumbles. And those rumbles get down to about 8 hertz. And elephants from the work that's been done, they now realise that elephants are in contact or know the presence of other animals within 10 kilometres. So, 10 square kilometres, I'm sorry, within 10 square kilometres. A male bull elephant, African elephant, weighs over 6 tonne. It's got a trunk about 2.5 metres, which is involved in producing this low frequency sound. So for an 8 kilo animal to produce an 11 hertz vocalisation is truly remarkable, and it makes one ask the question as to why natural selection would favour such a thing. The morphology of the koala auditory apparatus is equally remarkable. So on the left up there, that's a skull that was picked up out on the Ironsley River a few years back. It's was about 330 metres from the Gulf, 330 kilometres from the Gulf. So it really shows you how far north these guys go. The auditory bully, oh no, getting my buttons confused. Back. Okay, there we go. The auditory bully are these two things here. They're projecting really at the rear of the skull. They are huge. No other marsupial has auditory apparatus anywhere near this side. It even is more convincing when you look at them in transverse section. This is a CT scan. We didn't chop up any koalas to get this picture. So these are the auditory bulla. They're compartmentalised. All these. It's a huge area. This is the brain case here, just for comparison. A huge amount of the skull is involved in the hearing, and I don't know anyone who's done a hearing test on koalas. Probably couldn't get him to sit in the chair and press the buttons and get the tones sorted out. But there's no direct evidence. But we know that large acoustic bully are usually associated with increased sensitivity to low frequency sound. The paleontologists are the only people who've really taken an interest in this. In particular, Julian Louis, who's now at Griffith University. Julian considered this was an adaptive response. He looked at koala skulls from Riversley, koala skulls or ancestral koala skulls that they dissolved out of the limestone. And so 20 million year old koala skulls, which he compared to modern koala, and one of the things that had really changed was the size of these bulli. So his conclusion was that this is a response to the drying out of the continent. As Australia's drifted north, the rainforest disappeared, dry eucalypt forests appeared, and it's really... Yep, I'm well aware, nearly there. So he interpreted it as the need for koalas to be able to hear over a much larger area in the open eucalypt forests. And and that is where they're living these days. So koalas show major adaptations to both produce and to hear low frequency sound. So we're getting into the final straight, Carolyn, just remain calm. So this is a bioacoustic recorder. We use these a lot these days. It's the way to do surveys of animals just listening for vocalisations. We've done a lot of recording of koala vocalisations in the last 12 months, and we've been hearing some unusual low frequency sound. This thing has a very low, a 20 hertz microphone, so it's got a very, the way it goes is it records onto an SD card, and we use software to look at sonograms. Last slide, Carolyn. And this is a sonogram. If you're not used to looking at sonograms, the horizontal axis time, vertical axis frequency goes from 0 to 2.2 kilohertz. The other thing you need to know is the intensity of the sound, it reflected in the colour. So up the top here, with this just blue, no sound, bit of insect noise here, bit of probably insect again. So all of that red band, that intense sound under 400 hertz, that's wind farms. This was recorded about 1 kilometre from Caban. So what are the impacts of this on the koala? Well, the first is these will mask koala calls. We've done a lot of recording of koalas. A distant koala call comes up on the recorder at about 350 hertz, so you won't hear it with this. Perhaps the more significant thing, seeing there's been some discussion on footprints, the noise footprint of wind farms is not being talked about. In none of the PERS have there been any discussion on the noise footprint. So this has taken 1 kilometre from Caban. It's really not it's 1 kilometre from the nearest turbine. It's really 26 turbines. 1 kilometre, it'll still be pretty strong at 5 kilometre. We're picking it up at 10 kilometres when we're listening to koalas. Not at a level where it would interfere with the koala call. But wind farms like koalas, they're producing low frequency sound. If you think of the 80 tower turbine that's to go at Upper Burdekin, the noise footprint of that will be huge. It'll probably be 1 to 4 kilometres surrounding the whole thing. So when they talk of setting aside the forest they haven't cleared, when they talk about that as an offset, that's bullshit. The koalas will probably not use that area because an animal which is acutely sensitive to low frequency sound won't go there. So they're sterilising the area. It'll be the same for many other animals. They do not like intense low frequency sound. This hasn't been in the PERS, it hasn't been addressed. I mean, it really is a bloody disgrace. When I think of animal programs which have gone wrong in Queensland, you have to think of the cane toad. The blokes who planned that release in 1934, they probably did a much better job of it than what these guys have done. This is a sham. So, I've actually lied to you, Carolyn. I have one more. I have had to pack this into, well, I think I said 10 minutes, and I don't think I went near that. But an extended version of this, which will be the full sound and light show. I'm sorry I didn't play you any sounds. Melinda Pub, 4th of April. It's a TKMG occasion, and please come.